Hi there! Today I'm going to show you how to make homemade Velveeta cheese using goat milk. And I'm really excited about this recipe and showing you guys how to make this because it is so easy and it's really fun to make. So I think you're all going to have a really fun time trying this. So it's a really simple recipe. I'm going to start with 2 gallons of whole raw goat's milk. You can use cow milk too, but the recipe might be altered a little bit if you're going to be using cow's milk. There's a really good video on how to make Velveeta cheese using cow's milk. If you're using cow's milk, then I'll put a link on the end of this video for you so you can watch that video. Basically, there's just one little different step in it where you don't have to use cheesecloth for draining off the whey if you're using cow's milk. So anyway, I'll start out by showing you what you'll need for making Velveeta. In addition to the milk, you'll need some baking soda and some citric acid, some butter, canning salt, and then you can optionally use annatto cheese coloring. You don't have to use that, but I like to make my cheese colored. It just is more fun doing it that way. Otherwise, you can just make white Velveeta and it tastes just as great. So the first step is to get your milk to 140 degrees. And so right now I'm heating the milk and got the thermometer in there. And so just stir it periodically just so that it doesn't crust on the bottom. And if you're going to be using the cheese coloring, you can add it right now. Otherwise you can add it later on, but I'd suggest doing it before you add anything else. So I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So we're going to get about half a cup of cold water and add around 50 drops of the annatto cheese coloring to it. Okay, that was a little under 50. And you want to dilute it in water. So about 1/4 cup per 25 drops or so. And so the directions on the bottle say use about 25 to 50 plus drops per gallon of milk. So since we have 2 gallons, I'm just going to do a little under 50. So since we wanted a little bit lighter of a color, we don't need to use quite as much. So I'll add this to the milk. Stir it in. And the color stays in the curds pretty well. The whey will be slightly colored, but a lot of the coloring stays in the cheese curds. And it looks pretty light still, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the coloring. One thing to just note is that the cheese does seem to get darker as you go on and as you let it sit. Sometimes once it cools, it seems to be darker too. So it might look kind of light at this point, but it'll get actually a little bit darker. And 2 things you can do while you're waiting for the milk to heat is, one, get your cheesecloth ready. You can wash it or just boil it just to make sure it's really clean and sterile. I have some, actually it's butter muslin, works better. You can buy it at cheese making supply companies. And so this is the cheesecloth. It's folded in half right now, so it's actually wider than it looks. But I'm just going to put it on the stove and get that boiling while we wait. And then also you can get your containers for the cheese ready, which means just lightly grease them and then just set them aside so they'll be ready. And I suggest using either glass or metal containers of some sort, since the cheese will be hot when you're putting it into the molds. So I'm going to just quick grease these. This way the cheese doesn't stick as much. Okay, the milk is just about at 140 degrees now, so we're ready for the next step. What we're going to do now is get the citric acid and put that in there. We're going to need 5 teaspoons for 2 gallons, so just 2.5 teaspoons per gallon. Let's see here. I'll just do a tablespoon with just 3 teaspoons. Just sprinkle it over the top. 3/4, so, alright. 5 teaspoons. Sometimes you need a little bit more than that. Just kind of lightly stir it and watch how much it separates. Sometimes it helps to add a little bit more. And you can see how the curds are actually darker than the rest right now. And I'll turn the heat off now too, so it doesn't keep getting hotter. Add a little bit more citric acid. You don't want to stir it too much, otherwise the curds get really small. And then it's hard to strain off the whey. Add just a little bit more. Still taking a lot to get separated. So just keep adding the citric acid a little bit at a time until it looks right. You'll just want it to be separated mostly. You don't want there to be a lot of unseparated milk still under there. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Most of it's separated out, and so we're gonna just let it sit for probably just a couple minutes, and the curds will kind of float to the top, and then we'll strain it off. So we have our cheesecloth boiled now, and I'm going to drain off the water. Then we can line this colander with it. Just be careful because it's easy to get burned. Let that cool a bit. So I have a bowl underneath so that we can just catch all the whey. Line that with the butter muslin. And now we're ready for the cheese. Okay. That's third. Usually it won't all fit in there at once until you drain some of the whey off. The butter muslin works just great to get the whey off without letting the curds through. So, a really good way to drain off the whey quickly is just to go back and forth like this. Just be careful not to get burned because it's easy to do that if you go too far towards your hands. So you can see that the whey is still yellow. And you can also see that the curds are still even yellower. Just do the same thing again. Just keep doing that till you get the pot empty. And then once you get all the curds in here, you want to keep draining off the whey until the curds are really pretty dry, and they'll kind of roll around as a ball in the cheesecloth. And it's really getting a lot drier right now. So just keep doing this until it basically is a ball rolling back and forth in there. Okay, now comes the fun part. We're gonna add a teaspoon and a half of baking soda. Just add that to the top. And 3 teaspoons of salt. Let's use a tablespoon here. Sprinkle that on top. And then 2 tablespoons of butter. Okay, now we're going to turn on the heat again and just stir all of that in. Now this is really fun to watch what happens after you add the baking soda. It starts rising really quickly. And just keep stirring it, and you'll see it kind of puff up as it gets warm and as you stir it in. And then after a while it'll start melting down. And depending on what you want the texture of your cheese to be when you're done, you can add a little bit of cream or milk at this point, just like a tablespoon or 2, or you can leave it as is. If you want it more for a dip, then you can add the milk or cream. But if you want it more stiff, like to slice it, then you can just leave it as it is. So just keep stirring it kind of vigorously so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. And you can see it's starting to melt down there and getting less and less puffy. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now we're going to just pour them into the molds, and then we'll put them in the refrigerator. So this is a batch I made a couple days ago. It's a little bit more of a runny batch, so this is really good for dips. One of our favorite things to do with it is add some salsa, and then you have a perfect nacho dip. This stuff will probably turn out more stiff, so it'll be better for slicing and other things like that. And you can see how this batch over here is lighter. I added a little bit less of the coloring. So it just depends on your preference and what you want. And you can be creative, and that's part of the fun thing about cheese making, is you can just make cheese however you want. You can make it a lot of different ways for a lot of different recipes. There's so many different variations you can do. Just be creative and try out different things, and don't be afraid to try different cheeses and see which ones you like best. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it's been helpful to you. So now I'm just going to put the cheese in the fridge and let it cool. And so that's it. It's really easy, folks, and I encourage you to try making Velveeta. It's a lot of fun and super easy.